Oh, what a weekend. We had an amazing Submission Underground that took place on Sunday. So, not only was this loaded with talent, and not only was this loaded with surprises, it was stacked with anticipation, all leading to the main event. And the main event was just that. This was a very special match of the night. So, quick backstory on it, but you've got Craig Jones, the most popular, by far, no-gi grappler alive, and the best no-gi grappler alive. So who is going to challenge Craig? Well, we didn't know the answer to that. Because when you're dealing with Craig Jones and you're dealing with a rule set as vicious as submission grappling, where you're only encouraged to do one of three things: break an arm, break a leg, or strangle your opponent. It is no nicer of a rule set than what I just stated for you right there. So when you're dealing with that and you're dealing with the most dangerous guy at it in Craig, you got to bring in somebody that can protect themselves. All right, you can't just allow people to end up getting stretched out and go to the emergency room. It's a very real thing. So instead of just seeing who wants a paycheck, who wants to come forward and be on Fight Pass and be in this main event spot, we held a tournament. We need to know that you want Craig, that you believe you can beat Craig, and most importantly, that you can defend yourself against Craig should you be wrong like everybody else has been. Okay. Well, this guy named Mason Fowler steps forward. Okay. Now, at the time of this story, he is this guy. Nobody knew who Mason Fowler was 8 weeks ago. Nobody knew what a Mason Fowler was. I could convince you that's a meal at a restaurant. I could convince you that that's a piece of furniture in an art store. You wouldn't know the difference. Turns out Mason Fowler's a badass grappler. That's what it turns out Mason Fowler is. So he raises his hand. He says, put me in the tournament. Oh, and by the way, before you think denying me a spot within this tournament, you should know I've already wrestled your boy Craig, and I should have beat him. Now, these two met up, what Mason's referring to. He and Craig met up in the finals of the Abu Dhabi trials. And that's very relevant that it was a trials, because I think that's something that you can relate to. Even if it was back in your high school day, if you wanted to get to the state tournament or the state playoffs, you had to qualify to do it. If you were a college athlete, if you want to move on to the postseason, you have to qualify to do it. If you're a world or Olympic athlete, or even if you're not, but you observe the World and Olympic Games, you can understand the relevance of a trials. So they meet up in the finals. There's a point system to the way ADCC works. Mason Fowler was denied 2 points. 2 points that should have been called, per the agreed upon rules, were not. This is Mason's version. So the media turns to Craig Jones and goes, hey, you're not going to believe it. This guy Mason Fowler is claiming that he should have beat you. As a matter of fact, you should have been in Abu Dhabi, of which Craig went to the finals, I should mention. Goes to the medal match. You shouldn't have been there. You should have even been in the tournament. Mason should have. That's what we're hearing. Craig said he's telling the truth. I don't know if there's ever been a more honest guy in the history of sport than Craig Jones in that moment. He said, Mason's telling the truth. They shorted him 2 points. I have the foggiest idea why. I understand the rules the same as he does. He should have had 2 points. Would have changed the complexion of our competition. Okay. So Mason goes through the tournament, which means he's got to go against 3 guys in one night. Oh, and by the way, he's got to beat 3 guys in one night. Oh, by the way, he happened to tap all 3 guys all in one night. It's Mason versus Craig Jones. First ever Submission Ground Championship. Boom, we found the right 2 guys. So as you move forward, it's very hard to believe, regardless of the story, backstory, or subsequent tournament, that anybody can get the jump on Craig. When I tell you this guy is the best, if you haven't been following or you don't know who Craig Jones is, I don't have another way to say it. When I say he's the best, I don't mean he's one of the best. By golly, he's really good. When I tell you he is the best, I'm talking about he's the best alive. 6 billion men on this planet, none of them better at this sport than Craig. So Craig goes out there with Mason, and Craig kind of showed what I just said. I mean, in all fairness, Craig was looking for some positions, but Mason had a different strategy. He had a very clear strategy that's well within the rules, and Mason was well within his right to evoke this strategy. So he makes it out of what we call regulation. Now, in regulation, anything goes as long as it's not a strike. You cannot elbow, knee, punch, or kick. Anything else you can think of goes. Again, you're only encouraged to do 3 things: break an arm, break a leg, strangle a neck. It's vicious. It's as vicious as I'm making it sound. I don't take any pride in that. I didn't write these rules. I'm just sharing for you. If you don't follow it very closely, it's a contact sport at the highest of levels. So They make it out of the regulation. They go into an overtime. What overtime is going to look like, okay? There's two things at play. If you can submit your opponent, great. But if you can't submit him and he can't submit you, ultimately, it will defer to whoever in the offensive position maintained that offensive position longer. So if you're on defense, think of it from that perspective. You're trying to not be submitted, but you're also trying to escape. That's it. That's all you need to know about overtime. If you're on defense, don't tap, get out quickly. Great. So Craig attacks first, and Craig stays there all day and a little bit longer. I mean, he racks up so damn much time. This one's all but done. At this point, it's rudimentary. Craig's going to leave with the championship. Craig stays undefeated. Next. Good thing that's not the way the sport works. Good thing we don't just stop it and go, okay, we get it. All right, there's a reason you let the boys hold the match. So Mason gets his turn on top. And Craig's having a hard time getting out. And all that riding time that Craig just accumulated is starting to go the opposite way. And Mason puts on what is called a body triangle. Now, that is a manipulation done. It would be what's known as a figure four lock. So you're doing it with your legs, but you're doing it around the waist, hips, and body of your opponent. Very tight, but very relevant to the story. That's what he's doing with the lower half of his body. The upper half is he's trying to strangle Craig Jones. Craig now has to defend the choke, but it's going to be very hard for Craig to go to the second option, which is to escape. He's trapped. He's trapped very much so within the two most powerful parts of a guy's body who is using both at the same time, form this figure four body lock. Okay. So Mason's first option is to look for the rear naked choke. You guys might know it as a sleeper hold. He can't find it. Craig's defending it. So Mason comes into option B, which is called a neck crank, where instead of getting under the chin, where you would need to be for the choke, you come over the chin and you begin to crank and turn the head. Also relevant to the story, because what ends up happening is Craig lets out an audible sound. The referee stops the match, calls that a surrender. Now, allow me to explain. These three things are going to all be in conjunction, okay? In conjunction. Look at the three things that I've just stated for you. Body triangle. Hold that thought. Neck crank. Hold that thought. Audible sound. Hold that thought. Let me tie these dots together. The rules are very clear, and this would carry over to mixed martial arts as well. If a person is on defense, I mean, they're in trouble in some fashion, and they speak or make a sound of any kind, the match is over. Now, the reason I point that out, that it's a sound or noise of any kind, it is because unlike the practice room, you do not have to say tap. You do not have to say stop. You do not have to say uncle. You don't have to say surrender. You don't have to say I quit. If you say anything, the referee is to interpret that very clearly per the rules as a surrender. Relevance being, there was a few guys who at the course of time that were getting pounded on or getting tapped out, then instead of saying tap or stop, they would cry out in pain as a way of toughing through it. Something along these lines as a way of toughing out and not having to tap. No, ref, done. We're done. That's a commission rule through the ABC. Now, I tie that over to grappling because what happened within the body triangle is that Craig said, look, that thing was so tight that it squeezed the air through my lungs and a sound came out of my mouth. Now, that is what happened. It was just a sound. It was more of a, It was exactly what Craig described, in all fairness. In all fairness, it was as though somebody squeezed all the air out of you and he just went, but there was a sound. And I don't know that that would ever even be picked up if we were not in this time that we're in now. If you would have had a crowd and an audience like a typical Craig Jones sold-out event, I don't think you would have heard it. I don't know that is relevant to my story as much as I'm just digressing and making conversation with you, but in this case, the referee did hear it, and the referee stopped it. The referee took all sorts of criticism after the fact, and the referee makes himself very accessible, Dave Hagen, very accessible because he always wants happy, sad, indifferent, but he wants guys to have knowledge for next time. Let me tell you what I saw. Let me tell you why it was called this way. Like it or not like it, make sure you understand the rules and then you can plan your own strategy for next time. But here's what happens. So the ref makes himself very accessible. And I overheard the referee talking, and he was talking to a number of athletes, but Craig was one of them. He said, Craig, I trust you. I know you. I know your skills. I trust you. Like anybody here, if you're in a choke and I think it's bad, I'm going to refer to your judgment. That means if you go asleep, I'm going to allow you at this level. I'm not going to decide you're in trouble. But when it comes to a neck crank where your neck can be broken, I am going to decide. You made a sound. I stopped the fight to protect you. We're all done here. Well, that is very hard to argue against. I mean, that is what the referee saw. Like it or not, or why the sound came because of the leg, there was a sound. He was in a catch. That's what happened. Okay. And you can decide you don't like any of that. That's okay. This isn't me against you. I'm telling the story. Your witness, Your Honor, right? I mean, now there's the other side of it. So Craig is the ultimate gentleman. Even if it's an act, even if inside he's red hot, he'll never show it. He couldn't be a more presentable person, but he's also a competitor. And look, that one's going to bother him. He knew he was in a good spot. He was up on time. That was changing, but it hadn't changed yet. He was still up. He just needed to clear this position. He gets his check, he gets his belt, he goes on to the next one. It's just one of those situations. So Mason ends up pulling it off, and a lot of people were trying to take away from Mason's glorious moment. And that was very unfair too. Mason didn't try to do anything. Mason put a lock on while having a body triangle, waited for the referee to make a call, got up and went home. And that's the way it goes. That's what happened to Mason the first time when he wasn't given points at ADCC. I mean, in all fairness, that's just what happens. Some goes your way, some go against you, some should have gone your way. But the media believes it should have gone against you. I mean, the whole thing just turns into a mess. So what do you do? They are now one apiece. What do you do? It would seem as though you rematch. I got it. Do you do an immediate rematch? Does Mason going to go on his run? Do we have a tournament to see who takes on Mason? I mean, there's a number of options here. There's a number of ways to rectify this. But to claim foul ball because you're a Craig fan, I think is a stretch. And I don't think that Craig's the only one that happened to over the course of the weekend. Masvidal goes out, does awesome. By the way, George Masvidal looked awesome. George Masvidal has a technique. I can't figure this damn thing out. He throws a rear kick, and it's a kick. He definitely hits you with his shin, but he also hits you with his knee. Relevance being he's fairly close. Like if this was your toes or your foot, you could see where there's some range. He doesn't have a lot of range because his knee even hits you in the body, but he's able to keep his head so far away that he's completely protected. If the opponent was to throw one right down the middle, it would miss. It's this incredible technique that there's kickboxers don't know how to do this. Masvidal comes out, he unleashes it. Second contact of the night. Boom. First he kicks Usman in the leg. Second he throws his kick. I'm sitting here talking, but hits him right in the body. Usman comes back, goes through the fire, gets through the grit, gets his hands on Masvidal. I mean, this thing's a war. And it wasn't an overly competitive war in that, okay, another round's down, another round for Usman. Okay, let's go do 5 more minutes. Okay, another one for Usman. Okay, let's go do 5 more minutes. Okay, another one for Usman. But within all of those victories, there's a struggle. I mean, these guys are fighting. And it wasn't the kind of fight that Usman thought or hoped it would be. It was not a matter of go take Masvidal down and keep him there. Masvidal was very hard to take down, offered a tremendous amount of resistance, but also did not stay on the bottom. It wasn't the kind of fight that anybody thought we were going to get, but they fought all the same. Usman did what he needed to do all the same. And a lot of what he did when he found out how hard it was to take George down was do a little of in between. Okay, I can't take him down, but I don't necessarily want to stand toe-to-toe with him. Let me clinch him, let me push him in the fence. So when he does that, he was able to slow George down. He was able to gain favor with the judges. Right, whoever's back is against the fence, even though it's a very similar position. But if your back is on the fence, you are losing in the eyes of the judges. And then Usman was able to score from there. Yeah, there were some foot stomps involved. There was some knees to the thighs involved. There were some body shots. He was doing a good job of annoying Masvidal with some shoulder strikes. Did a great job. Did a great job. I know that was not his plan. I know that wasn't his strategy. It wasn't even thought what he was going to have to do. He had to adapt on the fly. Instead of giving him credit for that, so people were coming out after the fight and attempting to say that, those foot stomps are a bunch of crap and holding the guy on the fence is, this is garbage. instead of just tipping your hat to Usman and saying, great job. You just beat the BMF. Great job. Hard stop. And if you rewound the tape, the same thing had happened to Masvidal in his previous fight. He gets to jump on Nate Diaz, but it was a doctor stoppage after the completion of 15 minutes of fighting, which is a sizable time to be fighting, by the way. I mean, most fights are scheduled for 15 minutes. They do all 15 minutes. And people didn't want to give Masvidal the credit that he deserved, a championship, his glorious moment, his 15 minutes in the spotlight. They didn't want to give him that, and it wasn't because he didn't deserve it. It's because they like Nate better. So now that everybody jumped on the Masvidal ship, they don't want to give Usman the credit because they like Masvidal better. And I would only share for you, there seems to be a theme, and it seems to all equal out the same way that Masvidal didn't get his shine the night of Nate. Usman's not getting his shine over Masvidal. It's just one of these weird and baffling things. And I pointed out for you because I do feel like that's happening to Mason right now. Mason went out, followed the rules, listened to the instructions, did everything he was supposed to do, and they raised his hand at the end of the night. What the hell did he do wrong?